I'm Kathleen Eichenlaub, and I'm an alcoholic. Um, Thank you so much, Dan, for inviting me to be here. My sobriety date is January 17th, 1989. I have a home group, I have a sponsor, and she knows she's my sponsor because I call her regularly. And I have the privilege of sponsoring Women in Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, and I can tell you that when I found alcohol at the age of 11, which of course at the time I thought I was a very wise and mature individual. Since having kids, I know how insanely young that is. But from the time I found it, I certainly didn't drink every day at age 11, but I had found the answer, because I always felt really weird and really different. Um, and when I drank, I mean, I loved the way it tasted. I loved the way it felt when it went down. I loved the way it felt when it hit my gut, but I really love what it did for me because I no longer felt anxious or afraid or less than. I mean, and it didn't just take me to like even, it made me feel better than you. And so I chased that daily for as long as I could. Um, and it progressed pretty quickly. I mean, by the time I was in middle school, I was, using other things and stealing and getting suspended from school and hanging out with the wrong crowd. I mean, I think I was the wrong crowd. Um, and it just kept progressing really quickly. In high school, my dad gave me an old Pinto that he had repainted bright shiny red. Now, there's people on here who may know what a Pinto is, but I've spoken at meetings where the average age is like 20 something. They don't even know what it is. But anyway, his name was Petey, and it never occurred to me to not drink and drive. I mean, if you're somebody like me, you're not thinking about not drinking. And if you have a car, why would you not drive it? And I didn't just not care about that, but I also would let anybody else drive it too. And I constantly drank and drove. I would hit cars, and sometimes they were parked and sometimes they were moving. And, this was in the 80s, and things were just a lot more lenient then. I mean, I don't think I would have gotten away with uh, now what I got away with then. And, one time I hit a car on the Baltimore Beltway. I'm from Baltimore. And I just knew, like as drunk as I was, I knew I needed to get out of there really fast, right? Because if I pull over to the side of the road, which is what a normal person would probably do, I know I'm going to get in trouble. And I was willing to go to any lengths to keep me from getting into any kind of trouble. And that's not how I was raised. But one of the things alcohol did for me once, like immediately, was I just didn't care about any anybody else, anything else, any rules or laws or anything. And I the guy got my tag number, traced it to my dad, and my dad called me, and I woke up. I was awoken by phone calls the next morning, and I was still half asleep and still half drunk. And I heard what he said, and the first thing that came out of my mouth without a second of thought was, "It wasn't me." I just had already gotten into that pattern of, "It's not me." And I had to go to court for that, and he hired an attorney for me. And I put on a little suit to try to look all nice and innocent. And the attorney explained to me what the word perjury meant and how I needed to not do that. And I had no intention of telling the truth because I knew if I told the truth, I was going to get a consequence I didn't want. And even though it didn't look really good, I thought, what do I have to lose? And I went before a judge that day whose son I had dated, and he let me off. And that's kind of how a lot of things went for me. I'd get into some trouble and I somehow would like skate out of it without too big of a consequence. So, I'm in public high school, but I am like not doing well. I mean, from the very beginning, I threw everything away so that I could drink. I mean, I used to get good grades. I used to do like extracurricular activities, and it was all gone within a year of my first drink. And, they're sending notes home to my parents saying she's not going to graduate. She's not doing what she needs to graduate. And I have a really big ego and I don't like to look bad. So I did what I had to do to get what I wanted. I didn't want to be the one that didn't graduate. And, back in the day, and some of you may remember this, the copies of the tests were made on one of those machines like this. They were kept in a file cabinet that really the lock did like absolutely nothing. And it was kept in the hallway, which is really kind of dumb on their part. But like I would break into that and I would get the tests that had the answers. And I really got out of high school by the skin of my teeth. And I went to college because it's what everybody else was doing. I applied beyond the last minute to a small school where my mom worked with people who had gone there, and they wrote letters for me, and I got undeservedly into this small college. And on my 18th birthday, on my way there, I remember having a conversation with myself about how I used to get good grades and do these extracurricular activities, and somewhere I'd gotten off the track, and I'm 18 now and I'm an adult and I'm going to college and I'm going to turn over a new leaf. And you know what, you guys, I really meant it. I really did. I have the best of intentions. And my first night at college, I was falling down the back steps of the fraternity house drunk, and it did not get any better after that. My nickname in college was Kathy from Hell, which pretty much sums it all up. I was having so much fun at college. I got two C minuses, a D, and an F my first semester there. And so then they put you on academic probation, and you have to get all C's, which isn't terrible by any means. And so I would like do just good enough to get all C's so that I didn't get kicked out. And then I'd get off academic probation. And then the next time I would be like, who cares, and get really bad grades again. And that's how my whole like college career was. And I'd be in summer school and school over winter break to make up these classes I was failing, and not very smart like it when it comes to what I'm doing when I'm drinking, because you think I would have caught on to a few things like just don't sign up for a class that's before, I mean, definitely not 10:30, but maybe like noon, and I would get these 8:30 classes because I would sign up with the best of intentions, and I just couldn't get there. When that happens, you get an F. And so I also in that college was voted the third top female partier in the school. And I want you to know that Alcoholics Anonymous has done a lot in terms of me being able to be honest, because I was 20 something years sober. And the way I would tell you what I just told you was that I was one of the top three, which means I could have been one or two. But the truth is, I was three, and I was insulted by that. But, that was going to be my claim to fame there. And, I was a psychology major, shocker, right? And we had to do a thesis to get out of college. And I honestly don't really know what that means. But in psychology, you have to come up with like a hypothesis. You have to figure out how you're going to test it. You have to test it. Then you got to figure out what the results mean. And you're supposed to do this background research before you start all that. And so like people were done and I hadn't started. Seniors were done and like partying all the time, and I hadn't started. And it didn't stop me from partying all the time. And so my thesis advisor, who was the one that had to sign off on everything, was a man who I partied with. And I would babysit his little boy, and he'd pay me with drugs. And these are the people I want in my life, right? And so, the introductory psych majors are required to participate in so many of these, theses. And yet, because I waited so long, they had all like done what they needed to do, and nobody wanted to like do an extra one to help me out. So I had nobody to do it. So I took my little questionnaires with a picture of kamikazes to the roof of a fraternity house, and passed out the drinks and passed out the questionnaires. So I'm sure whatever my results were, I'm sure they were very valid, and so then I don't know what to do with it because I don't know how to put a program in a computer. And I give it to my thesis advisor to handle all of that. And then I go back to do what I was supposed to do like in September, and it's now like May, which is the background research. And I'm just copying it word for word out of a book. And I show up at the thesis department building with two guys who were just like me. So they had the same thesis advisor. They were just now working on their theses. And we showed up, and the head of the department said, I'm sorry to tell you that your thesis advisor, so-and-so, had a nervous breakdown, and he's in the state mental hospital, and I'm now your thesis advisor. And, the three of us got together and came up with a keen alcoholic idea, which, by the way, only alcoholics can do. And we were like, there's no way we're going to graduate with this guy. And so we took our theses and we got in a car and we drove to the state mental hospital. And we said to our thesis advisor, we know you're having a hard time right now, but like you have to be our thesis advisor. So he was our thesis advisor from the mental hospital. And, that is like literally the only reason that I graduated. And he did get out in time to come to graduation. But, just all these crazy things with hardly any consequences. And, what started to happen for me at the end of my drinking is that, like, number one, I couldn't predict with any certainty, like, I'm not going to drink today, or I'm only going to have two. Because even though I never wanted to quit for forever, like I was like, there would be so many days where I'd wake up and it would be, the guilt and the remorse and the shame, having to have people fill in the blanks, which had to be done a lot for me. And then, of course, all of, the schoolwork that I'm insanely behind on. And so I would think, God, just today, so many times I would think, just today, I'm not going to drink. I'm going to go where I'm supposed to go, be where I'm supposed to be, when I'm supposed to be there, and I'm going to be fine. And by the last year, I couldn't stick to that, like even for a day, because something would happen to me either 8 in the morning, 8 in the night, somewhere in between, where I couldn't stand the way it felt to be inside my skin sober. And I had to have a drink, and so I would take the drink and I would get the relief. But the problem with me is that once I start, I can't seem to stop. And so I would always drink. And this was from the very beginning, even though it wasn't daily. I always drank until I passed out, blacked out, threw up, or just couldn't get my hands on anything else. And so, and then I'd be so baffled the next day, like, oh my gosh, how'd that happen? And there were certainly a lot of people, places, and things telling me I had a problem with alcohol. I knew I had a problem, but I didn't know what it was. And I knew my problem wasn't alcohol because that's my solution. Whatever problem I have, that is my solution. And so they're crazy. And it's really hard to find the right solution when you don't actually know what the problem is. And I didn't find out till I came to AA that my problem is alcoholism. And it might sound like it's the same thing, but it's not. Because if alcohol were my problem, as soon as I get it out of me, I'm going to be fine. And when I get alcohol out of me, I just get crazier. And so it's my alcoholism, and I have to treat that, and I treat that in AA. And the way I got to AA is that I was working in a treatment center. And I thought it was really funny at the time, and so did my friends. But there's no doubt in my mind that my higher power chose to take me there because I was 22 and I had all these like nevers, right, that I would tell you. And I just didn't think you could be alcoholic I've never been arrested or what I even graduated from college, right? And so, um, but I got there. I know my higher power took me there so he could show me, like, this is alcoholism. That's your problem. The solution is in AA. And I don't think I can't imagine finding it, at least at 22, without that situation. And there's all the program going on around me, and I stole the big book and some other literature from them. And one of the things I stole was the 20 questions, and I didn't pass it. And I decided that what that meant was I had a potential problem with alcohol if I continue to drink, and I'm just going to stop. So I don't need to get sent to a treatment center like these people. And so I tried to not drink on my own, and it did not go very well. For a short period of time that I could stay stopped, I was the most miserable person you could ever come across. I had anxiety attacks at the end of my drinking for like the last year. And the solution was to drink, like, because that'll solve it. And now I don't have a program, and I'm not drinking, and I'm out of my bloody mind, and I'm having anxiety attacks. And now I don't have anything to help me with it. And I'm just really bat crap crazy. I mean, I'm looking through the patient files looking for my next boyfriend, is like, that's what I was doing. And I was not even narrowing it down to good choices. So, there's a lot of people in AA that worked there. And when it's me and I think I've got you all full, but really we can smell each other a mile away. And I was trying do it on my own thing. For the first time in my life, I decided to be the designated driver, and I wasn't willing to change anything in my life because I thought I had a very cool and exciting life, and I'm just going to not drink, but I'm not going to change anything else. And, shocker, I'm going to the same places with the same people, and these places are bars. And, and I end up, I can't stay sober that way. And so, you know, this woman who at the time had 5 years that I worked with, and it sounded like impossibly forever. She had been watching me and listening to me for a couple months, and she heard me whining about whatever I was whining about that day. And she just looked at me and she said, you know what, Kathleen, it doesn't have to be that way anymore. And I don't know why, but I heard it. And I knew she was telling me the truth. Now, I had tried a bunch of other things. I mean, I had gone to a couple AA meetings where I would come late, sit in the back. I only heard what was different between you and me, and then I'd run out as soon as the prayer was over. And I tried, because I knew something was wrong with me. I tried other 12-step programs. I was told in my first sobriety date was 88. I was told that there were 76 12-step programs. I tried some of those. I tried going to church, other religious organizations. I liked to go to the bookstore and go to the self-help section and buy books for my various afflictions because I have many. I tried, being healthy and staring at candles and just anything I could think of, I tried it, and none of it worked. And so, like when this lady told me that, it doesn't have to be that way. I knew she was telling me the truth, but I knew that if I wanted it to be different, I was going to have to actually come to AA. And I was doing everything I could to have that not be the place I had to go. Because I'm hearing all this stuff in the treatment center, and I'm hearing people talking about, sponsors are people who tell you what to do. And, you're going to get out of yourself and you're going to help other people. And, none of that sounded like fun to me. But the worst was, they said that for fun, they went bowling sober. Now I'm 22 and I'm going to bars with these bands and I'm thinking, you want me to bowl sober? Like I, I just no. And but I was 100% out of ideas, 100%. And so I came to AA really desperate, which is a really good way to come. It does not, however, mean I was happy to be here or anxious to jump in and do everything. For well, I had anxiety attacks for the first 11 to 12 months of my sobriety. And I there weren't cell phones back then, but like the ladies would come at me with their teeth. And it was even before people started getting their business cards, right? They would come to me with little pieces of paper with their name and number on it. And I'd smile and I'd stick it in my pocket. And when I got home, I would throw it away. I never once used that. And I just slowly was coming to meetings and I would tell you, anybody, I don't talk in AA, so don't call on me, right? And like anybody's really going to listen to me or like they actually even care. But like, I just was so, again, having these anxiety attacks. I couldn't even imagine saying my name. But, slowly I kept coming and I got a sponsor. She was a very kind and loving and gentle sponsor. And, one day I probably had 6 months. Somebody didn't know my rule and they called on me in a meeting. And I had been watching for the time I had been here. And so I said my name and that I'm an alcoholic. I probably said one sentence. It probably made no sense. But the thing is I did what I was asked to do, which was huge. And that was one of the most important lessons I learned in the beginning that still holds me in good stead today. Like, do what I'm asked to do in AA. And I went through the steps very slowly. I would have told you at the time I wanted to be really thorough, but it was because they're like, you're on step 1. Okay, but I can read and I can read down the list and I can find 4 and 5 and 8 and 9. And I thought, no. And so I went really slowly and literally every step I took and every sponsor direction I was given, I did it knowing with 100% of my being that it was stupid and it wasn't going to work. Every single one. But I did it anyway, and I did a written first step, which was so wise of that sponsor because I could tell you my life was unmanageable. It was really clear, but I didn't understand how you can be powerless over liquid in a bottle, And so when I wrote, it wasn't like the wild and crazy things I did. It was the, well, I didn't intend to drink that night, or that night I went out and I intended to drink 2 drinks with my stepsister. And that was in Baltimore. And then I wake up the next day and I'm in a boat in the Inner Harbor with my boyfriend's brother's best friend. And I have no idea where my stepsister is, like that's what powerless is. Like once I take a drink, all bets are off. Like maybe I'll drink for 15 hours straight, remember the whole night and not embarrass myself. Or maybe I will go out and remember that second drink and then wake up the next morning and like be like, oh, I must have come home early, but then have other people tell me that no, you're actually there until the bar closed and you're doing wild and crazy things. And I always had some kind of an excuse, a rationale for those kinds of things, like, oh, like I didn't proof down, or I didn't eat enough before I went out, or a couple of times I swore somebody slipped me a Mickey. But my favorite excuse was I had so much alcohol in me from the day before that tonight it just took a little bit of alcohol to re-trigger all that alcohol and I get drunk too fast. That what that is it's powerless over alcohol. That's what it is. And, they told me like the first step is the only one I have to believe with 100% certainty. And I thought, God, I'd go with 51%. Like that sounds good to me. But, if I don't believe with 100% certainty, even if it's 99.9%, something in daily life is going to happen. And that 0.1% is going to tell me to pick up a drink, and so I worked very slowly, at like, I think 9 months of sobriety, somebody asked me to go on my first, they call them different things in different places. And I've lived in different places in my sobriety, like, the H&I that take a meeting somewhere, and they took me, I said yes. And I was petrified. And it was the first time I was going to like tell my story. And it was the old Francis Guy Key Medical Center in Baltimore City. And they let you smoke at the time. And here I am, like this perky little, like I might have turned 23 by that time with like 9 months of sobriety. And I'm telling my story. And I'm just so happy I actually got through it, like, and it was over. And they were all smoking in there. I mean, this lady came up to me after the meeting and she was smoking and she had oxygen. She was hooked up to oxygen, and she came up and she looked at me and she said, "I hope you know that not one person in this room related to anything that you had to say." And I was like, oh, but the thing is that I stayed sober and I did what I was asked to do and I didn't die, because I was just so full of fear. And, when I did do that fourth and fifth step, I had things that I swore I was going to take to the grave. But, I was told, pray before you write. And so I prayed before I wrote, and I couldn't believe it came out on the paper. And I thought, well, I don't have to say it. And I was told to pray before I, do my fifth step. And I did. And it came out of my mouth, and of course, all these things that I was so afraid of, and all these secrets that I had, she was like, yeah, me too. Right. And so like all of that went away. And, you know, with my first sponsor, I rested on my laurels, and I, got things in AA that I hadn't had before, like a boyfriend and a new job, and moved out of my parents' place. And without making a decision, I just was going slowly and slowly away from AA. And I didn't take a drink, but I became just as back crazy at 2.5 years as I had been when I was brand new. And so then I had to get what we like to call a mean old timer sponsor. And thank God for the multiple mean old timer sponsors I've had, because they've saved my life. And they care more about saving my life than they do about my feelings. And so with this one, like if I would call and complain, she would say, well, for Christ's sakes, Kathleen, stop sitting around thinking about yourself. If your dishes are dirty, wash your dishes. If your clothes are dirty, do your laundry. And I just wanted to cry. And I did another fourth and fifth step with her. My first one was really like an autobiography. This one was a little bit better. And see, that first kind and gentle sponsor, when I read it to her, she's like, oh, honey, you weren't that bad. And I thought, as scared as I was going into it, thinking I'm awful, as soon as she said that, what I heard her say was, you have no defects and you have no amends to make. And I'm just thinking like, yes, of course. And this mean old timer sponsor, when I read my fifth step to her, she had me there with paper and pencil, and she would say, write that down, and I came away from there, and I swear to you, I believed with every fiber of my being going into it, I would have no amends to make. I had 76 names on my 8-step list, and I came away with my list of character defects. Like, she told me I'm a liar, a cheat, and a thief, and she called me a couple other things too. And so I walked away from 5 with my list of defects and my amends, which gave me very little leeway to, drag my feet again. And so she said, tomorrow you're going to go make your first amends, and it's going to be to your father. And I was like, whoa, there's like 6 and 7, there's 8. And she goes, well, feel free to go home and read the 2 paragraphs in the big book on 6 and 7. And then you're going to make your amends to your dad. And I'm like, but no, 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 no. Like there's 8, and it talks about willingness, and I'm not willing. And she said, I don't care if you're willing, you should be willing. Maybe if you go make the amends, then you'll be willing. And I was like, oh my God. I sincerely looked for the AA police and like tried to talk to anybody I could that would tell me she was wrong. And nobody did, thank God. And, I've had several sponsors in my sobriety. All of the previous ones prior to the one I have passed away. But each one of them has been absolutely perfect for me at the time that I had them. And she just was so wise. And she said, you're going to make your amends to your dad first. And sponsorship has been so important to me, but I don't know if it's any more important than with step 9, because she left to my own devices. I'm going to not go to people I should go to. And I'm going to go to people I really should just stay away from. And so she told me all the things I needed to take care of with my dad. And, with each one, it's not about, I don't say anything other than make amends for that. I don't say you, whatever, or make an excuse. And I was like, I'm scared. I'm going to cry. And I had this idea that I was raised with my dad telling me not cry. I've since figured out that was my warped perception, but she was it doesn't really, that doesn't really have anything to do with it. If you cry, you cry, you know, and my worst fear came true as I cried. And when it was all over, he said, and he paid for the attorney. And when I brought that up, he said there was no attorney. And you know, she told me to not argue with him about anything. And I walked away from there and I didn't feel good about myself. And I thought, you see, this really isn't going to work for me because I feel like crap. And honestly, I don't think I'm supposed to feel good when I just tell my father all these things, some of which he knew and some of which he didn't, you know. But my sponsor was really clear. She said, so that's the direct amends part, but you need to make living amends. She said, you don't say I'm sorry for being a shitty daughter and continue to be a shitty daughter. And she said, since I know you have no idea what a good daughter looks like, I'm going to tell you. You're going to call him every week. You're going to ask how he's doing. You're going to tell him how you're doing because he wants to know. And at the end of the conversation, you're going to say, I love you. And I was like, oh, no, like, no, we don't say that in my family like that. She goes, well, you do now. And I was like mortified. And, you know, the really funny thing about the way she had me make amends to him is that he started to change right before my very eyes, you know. And if you had asked me to make a list of like easily 200 things I wanted when I came to AA, I would not have put down a better relationship with my dad. I literally thought it was impossible. I loved him and I respected him, but I didn't like him and I didn't think he liked me. But it's really interesting how when I take care of my side of the street and I do what a good daughter does, not because I know what one does, but because my sponsor told me, like everything changes, you know. And he threw an amazing wedding for my husband and I. 26 years ago, I met my husband in AA. And I was like, he threw this amazing wedding for us. And I was like the biggest control freak. And I planned like every minute detail of the whole entire thing. And when he said to me, can I plan the daddy-daughter dance? I said, yes. And I was like, oh God, wasn't that just so generous of me, you know? And when it came time for the daddy-daughter dance, he put two chairs in the middle of the floor and he sat me down and gave me a handkerchief. And to the tune of Oh Danny Boy, he sang, Oh Daughter Dear. Not a Jaya in the house, and nobody knew about it. Nobody knew he was practicing, not his wife. I'm particularly emotional now because he passed away 2.5 months ago. And I cannot begin to tell you, like, as hard as that was and has been, my biggest thoughts in the beginning, especially, were thank God for AA and for that mean old timer sponsor, because like we were so good, you know. My brother has 10 years of sobriety and he has made amends to my dad, but it's been more recently, you know. And in the last few months of my dad's life, my dad kept asking my brother, are we okay? I need to know that we're okay. And he never had to ask me that because I had 36 years with him being in Alcoholics Anonymous and he knew we were okay, you know. And not long before he passed, I guess like a month, less than a month before he passed, I just had this intuitive thought, which I know comes from God, that I should go down to Florida and spend some time with him. They have a place in Florida and in Baltimore. And I went down there for 10 days and I had 10 great days with him. You know, we'd been talking about hospice for him beforehand. And I had these 10 great days and I thought, I don't know, do we need hospice? And I came back up, and not long after I left, I think 5 days, something dramatic happened and he had to go in the hospital. And bless my stepmother, who literally, I tell her all the time, like we would have lost him many times over the last like 10 to 15 years if it weren't for her taking care of him. And like her daughter went down and the two of them were able to get my dad back up to Baltimore so that he could pass in his own house, surrounded by family. And I was able to be there. And you know, he was really hard of hearing and everybody was yelling at him when he was like totally not conscious. And my stepmother's like, you can talk to him. I was like, I am talking to him, but I don't think I have to scream at this point. And you know, I held his hand and he wasn't conscious, but you know, he would squeeze my hand at things. And you know, and so when he passed away, like we were good, you know. And so grateful for AA. And you know, my brother and I both gave a eulogy at his funeral. Of course, we cried through it, but we did it, you know. And then as we're standing in the line, as people are coming by afterwards, you know, I'm getting like oh, you're a great public speaker. And I'm thinking, well, thanks to AA for that too, right? Because it's not really public speaking, but and many of his friends, he's stayed in Baltimore his whole life, and he's friends since he was in first grade, and some of them are still alive. And a lot of them said like that was a great like tribute to your dad, because my dad had a really warped sense of humor, and I thought about throwing in some things like that, and I just was like, no, this is about him and how much I love him, and my memories of him. And so I had so many positive experiences in making my amends, but there was never one where I thought, oh boy, I can't wait to go do this, right? Um, I have a stepsister. Our parents got married when I was 18, and I didn't get sober till I was 22. And I used to go out and drink with my stepsister. Um, and I can be a really nasty drunk. And I don't know what was happening, but she was driving and I was in the front seat. And I didn't like what she said, I guess, because I punched her in the face. And she told me to get out of the car. And I'm not stupid. Like, we're in Baltimore City, and I wouldn't get out of the car. And I mean, that caused a lot of problems in like my whole entire family. And then, of course, because I've punched her in the face, now I'm going to not talk to her. So it continued to, cause problems in the family. And so, when I made amends to her, and her dad had been in AA, he did not die sober, and he also didn't make any amends to her. So when I made amends to her, like, you would think that I was giving her $1 million or something, and I'm, you know, taking care of the things she knew about. And she's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you, thank you. And I'm like, wait, there's more. Because there was stuff she didn't know about, and like, I owed her money because I'd stolen money from her. And I was told to not make the amends until I could hand her the money. And that's what I did. And, I don't know how, like, I do these shitty things that I did, and I make amends, not because I want to, because the mean old timer sponsor told me I had to. And that I get this response from her, and that situation had to be part of my amends to every member in my family, and like her brother, my stepbrother, he was nice about it, but you could tell that his attitude about it, he was not throwing me a party. His attitude was kind of like, well, I'm going to wait and watch and see what happens, and that's where the living amends come in, thank goodness, and so I really, I'm so grateful for that, and oh my God, I forgot to tell this part of my story, but I'm such a low life and I didn't have any money, and I had to drink. And so I did a lot of stealing. And I mean, I'm so low that I even was like stealing money out of the Jerry's Kids, like, coin thing at the 7-Eleven. And so when I had to make that amends, and my sponsor's so big on it has to be a direct amends, by now I'm living in Los Angeles, and so I'm thinking, okay, whatever. She's like, you're going to find out where they are. I mean, if they're like in Iowa, I'm not going to make you fly there. And I'm thinking, like, there's no way this organization is anywhere near me. Like, clearly they're going to be in the middle of the country somewhere, right? And of course, they were like right down the street in Santa Monica. And, I went in there and I'm like, oh my God, this is so ridiculous. And I asked to talk to whoever was in charge. And, and I went to speak with her, and I was trying to explain to her, like, what AA is and as soon as I started to try to explain, she said, oh, my boyfriend's in AA. I know all about this, and it just, so I had so many amazing experiences, and I just don't know how I get to have that when I'm the one that was just such an a-hole, and we've had good things happen and bad things happen in sobriety, right? Because life happens, just because I get sober doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen. And, besides my dad passing, I mean, I've lost a bunch of sponsors. My husband lost his mother suddenly. He lost his father to cancer. We've had problems in our marriage. We've had struggles with both of our kids who are 24 and 20. And, those poor children to have, two recovering alcoholics as parents. Because as soon as the first one drank it all, like, she's an alcoholic, and, but I've had people in AA that have been able to help me to not, go batshit crazy on that. And, but, I've gone through the steps a couple of times, but I really live in 10, 11, and 12. And I love the 11th step so much. And with my dad passing, I mean, I always think I know everything, and so it's like, I'm like, well, he was old, I'm old. We knew he had like 10 different things wrong with him, right? We knew it was coming. I wasn't surprised. I thought, whatever, like, it's not going to be a big deal. Well, first I was in denial, And I thought, oh, I'm doing so well. And then I got out of denial and I was like, oh, that was denial. I think I'd like to be back there, right? And then like when it got to the anger part and I'm like repeatedly honking at somebody who won't get out of my way so I can get off my street, I was like, this isn't going very well on my own, as most things on my own don't go, right? And so um, I decided I would avail myself of all the things because there are women in the program here who have a for free grief support group that they've been inviting me. And I'm like, I go to yoga then, right? And I did, but I think I better go there, right? And my priest, when I told him about my dad, he's like, you can come talk to me if you want. And I thought, and I, in my head, thought, whatever. Then I'm like, okay, I think I better go talk to him, right? And, I sponsor a woman who lost her husband a year ago, and she's helped me so much and, recommends a book. Okay, I guess I should get the book and then I guess I should read it, right? And there's so much in the book and it's not an AA book, right? But today's reading was, it might seem really impossible, but if you can take your eyes off your own pain and try to help somebody else, you'll be in much better shape. And when I lean into the program and when I lean into God, so many of those things happen. Since I decided to lean into all those things and not try to do it by myself, I've had so many blessings happen. Some people call them coincidences, but I know that they're not. And I have so many of those when I am focused on AA and focused on God, because I was always trying to find that solution, right? And to fill that hole. And I found out it's a God in an AA sized hole, and there's absolutely nothing else that will fix it. Of course, this does not mean that I'm perfect. Feel free to ask my husband. He will tell you that. But I try every day, and from the beginning, I get up an hour to an hour and a half earlier than I have to because I need that time with God. If I don't have it to get my head screwed on straight, the day is not going to go well, And so AA has taught me absolutely everything, about a higher power and a relationship. I mean, at church, people don't get it. They're like, how do you, and I'm like, it's AA, like it's what they've taught me. There's a power greater than me, and I need to work on a conscious contact with it, and um, and then helping others, of course, it's like it says it throughout the big book. My solution to whatever it is to help someone else, and even if I don't think I'm helping them, just trying to help them is helping me because I'm getting out of myself. And it never ceases to amaze me that whatever I'm talking to someone else about is exactly what I need to hear, and um, I didn't sponsor many people for the first a long amount of time, but there were other ways that I, could help out. It didn't really matter what it was. And, when I had my first child and my husband traveled a lot, so I'm home a lot, and she was a very cranky, colicky baby. I thought I was going out of my mind. And, I had a hard time getting to meetings, and I shared about it once, and some woman made me look bad. And she's like, when my kids were little, I had to do whatever I had to. Like if I had to bring them to meetings, if I had to start a meeting with childcare, if I had to have a meeting in my home so I could get a meeting, that's what I had to do. And as much as she irritated me when she said that, because I thought she made me look bad, I started, taking my kid to meetings. And my friend and I started a meeting where you could bring your kids. And I started a meeting in my home, after they go to sleep. And it's got to come first, and yes, I have a husband and I have kids. The kids are 24 and 20 now, but I don't believe God got me sober so that I can, leave them home all the time. So, not going to a meeting every day when they're little and he's traveling. And I thought I was supposed to say yes to everything. And one day I was speaking 3 times in one day. And, that's when I had to have a conversation with my sponsor. And it has to be between me and my God and my sponsor. And the same goes for you. Like there's no pat answer to it, but she helped me figure out like what that should look like so that I'm not spreading myself too thin and not being too absent in their lives. But I've got to put AA first, or I am not a good wife, and I'm not a good mom, and I'm not a good anything else, And I love the analogy that if I started drinking at 11, I stopped emotionally maturing at that age. And so when I got here at 22, I really came as an 11-year-old. And I had missed a lot of lessons that my parents were trying to teach me. And so when I got here, I had to learn literally like how to be a friend, not because you told me and I did it, but because I had a friend and we were fighting like we were in 8th grade, even though we were both in AA. And then I had to tell him myself and be willing to take that direction, And like that's another important lesson I learned early on that still holds me in good stead is just to be honest with a sponsor, but also to be willing to share it at a meeting. Because really, I just don't want to look bad, and I certainly don't want to cry in front of anybody. So of course, because of that, I'm a crier, right? But I had to learn how to be an employee again, not because you told me how, and I did it because I was working and I was getting in trouble at work. And then I talked to my sponsor, and she said, Kathleen, get to work before the time you're supposed to be there. While you're there, only work, don't do anything else. Don't give them your opinion unless they ask you, and don't leave before you're supposed to leave. And I was like, whoa, like, and I did it and it worked. I was like, this is amazing. But like nobody told me that. And if they did, I wasn't paying attention. I had to learn how to be a girlfriend and a wife and a mom by screwing it up and talking to my sponsor and other people. And there's never been anything that I've gone through that somebody else in AA hasn't gone through. And I just think that we are so, so blessed. To have this program, right? And it's not about grief, but there's people who have been through it. And we have a program, we have a set of spiritual tools, and we have a place to go to. I mean, um, other than my brother, people in my family are not in program. Well, my husband and his wife. But so like I'm watching them in their grief and they don't have these tools that we have. They don't have, if I did not have AA to go to, which I go to my meetings, I pick up the phone when it rings. Like I would be isolating at home, which would be a terrible place for me. So like these things work in every way, shape, and form of my life. And I literally wouldn't have anything that I have, and I don't mean materially, if it weren't for Alcoholics Anonymous. And I, you know, was jealous of women when I came here. And, guess what the solution for that is? When I do start sponsoring women, I only sponsor absolutely gorgeous women. And I I come to love them so much. And that cures me of that problem. And then I get to help them when they have it because they have it too, right? Um, but anyway, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you for asking me, Dan. If you're new, I hope that you stay. And if you're not new, I hope that you stay. Thank you so much.